In 5th place today, we have the footage the Pentagon refuses to release from Alaska. Between the dates of February 4th to the 12th of 2023, 4 different unidentified objects were shot down over Alaska, South Carolina, the Yukon, and the Great Lakes. While cockpit audio from F-16 pilots who shot down the UFOs over Lake Huron was released, a spokesman for the Pentagon has confirmed that the footage will not be released in the near future, being quoted directly saying, "I can tell you that there is not currently any images or video footage that we can release. The imagery remains classified, and I have not received any information as to the potential timeline on a change in classification." This refusal is a drastic difference in comparison to the quick release of an Air Force photo of what is believed to have been a Chinese spy balloon that was shot down at the same time over on the East Coast, and footage from when a Russian plane appeared to intentionally collide with a drone last March. Noted UFO researcher John Greenwald requested the footage and photos of the UFO shootdowns be released via a Freedom of Information Act request, with the Pentagon claiming national security exemptions to deny this request. An Air Force official said that the images would reveal cryptology and national security concerns if released, and even the Canadian RCMP are playing coy, having ended their public search for the remains. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that sounds pretty dang suspicious to me. Hey, anyone want to take a random trip to the Yukon just to sightsee? Totally not to recover UFO debris or anything suspicious.
Number 4. The Observatory. In 2007, astronomer Alberto Meyer, living in Busta Arezizo, Italy, and I butchered that pronunciation, made an incredible discovery, almost completely by accident, which is where most scientific progress gets made. He was adjusting the focus of his telescope when he spotted and tracked a UFO as it flew across the surface of the moon. Now, the video shows the portions of the moon that he was focused on in close-up mode while tracking a solid black object as it flew over the surface of the moon. And look, I could just describe what is going on in this video, but I could also let you get your peepers on it and let you decide for yourself. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so here's roughly 24,000 words worth of context. Take yourself a look. Pretty weird, huh? That round black object is tracked as he catches just after it passing the Wallace crater, and yeah, this is how I'm learning that parts of the moon were named. I didn't know there was moon geography. It hovers and hesitates before making a sudden change of path at an exact 45-degree angle. Take your protractor out. The precision and control is what's giving people pause, you know? It seems to move as if it's being controlled, and with such mechanical dominance that it seems like it has to be something that's being intentionally driven, and not just a strange rock floating through the stars, or, I'm gonna be honest, a bug crawling on the lens, which is what I thought it might be. Now, commenters on the video, because this thing went viral when it got posted, pointed out that the object does not decrease in size at all, suggesting that the object isn't close to the moon, and rules out the theory that this is a shadow on the surface of the moon from a large object overneath. I'm only capable of so much, I'm gonna be honest. The science stuff, that's kind of above my pay grade, but I can confirm and offer my speculation on when videos of UFOs look weird, and that's exactly what's going on here. So is this a UFO? Who is to say?
Alrighty, in our 3rd place position, we have the Guy Hotel memo. It's the most requested document in the FBI's archives, right after the photo of Elvis and Nixon riding with an alien. The file has been checked out roughly 1 million times in the last 2 years alone. So far as KG cover-ups go, this one's fairly out in the open, but that doesn't make it any less invigorating. It's a single page, an unconfirmed report the FBI never even followed up on. The file in question? It's a memo dated back to March of 1950, authored by one Guy Hotel, who served as the director of the FBI field office in Washington, D.C., addressed to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In the memo, Hotel was relaying a story seen by an Air Force pilot about something bizarre they had seen in New Mexico, right around the time of Roswell fever. The memo describes flying saucers, circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. It goes on to say that inside each saucer was a flight crew, each occupied by 3 bodies of roughly human shape, but only 3 feet tall, and bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. The memo goes on to claim that the crafts were found because an aircraft radar had interfered with the controlling mechanisms of the saucer, and concludes by saying, no further evaluation was ever attempted. It seems like it should be a significantly bigger deal than that, no? No further evaluation? That's fine. Someone in the Air Force claims that they saw a series of flying saucers, piloted by tiny men in shiny spacesuits not even 3 years after the Roswell incident, set New Mexico news stations ablaze. But hey, it's probably nothing. At least there's some comfort in knowing that the government has always behaved like this when it comes to investigating and reporting on possible UAP and UFO sightings. Now, admittedly, there's no footage or photography of the incident to speak of, and it's a bit more government-approved hearsay. Whatever was seen on that day could have been something huge, or it could have been bogus. I suppose we'll never know, but it is worth mentioning that Project Blue Book was launched not even 2 years later, investigating UFO sightings in the Air Force, so that's all I'm gonna say on the subject.
Number 2, the Ryan Graves Report. Lieutenant Ryan Graves is a studied Air Force pilot. If you're a super big UFO enthusiast, you might even recognize the name. He's an FA-18 Super Hornet pilot who has flown the skies for 10 years and has seen countless UFOs in his time flying for the Navy, seeing all manner of things he couldn't explain. He spoke out saying, "These things would be out here all day. Keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy with the speeds we observed, and 12 hours in the air is about 11 hours longer than we'd expect." Now, one particular incident occurred in late 2014, when a Super Hornet pilot nearly crashed into one of these objects alongside Graves. Some of these objects were caught on plane camera, and we have got some of that footage for you here today. The pilot and his wingman were flying in tandem about 100 feet apart over the Atlantic East when something flew between them. Graves said that the object looked like a sphere encasing a cube, regular shape a plane would be. The pilots were concerned because were these things a covert drone program or something suspicious and secretive, government officials would have at least warned them, since they had fighter jets flying around for fear of collision. This was the reason the Navy was concerned that perhaps there was more to investigate with this particular encounter of unexplained aerial phenomenon. What was truly unsettling the pilots, besides the fact that there was almost a huge safety crash error there, some of that's words, right? And that was that these crafts were accelerating to hypersonic speeds, and then they would stop and turn on a dime, which is not really something the human pilots are capable of, even our best and brightest, Sorry Goose and Maverick. So what did the pilots think they were dealing with? Graves spoke out, saying, "We have helicopters that can hover. We have aircraft that can fly at 30,000 feet and right at the surface, but combine all of that into one vehicle of some type with no jet engine, no exhaust plume. So what do we think, my goblins and my ghouls? This does definitely seem like something worth digging into, doesn't it? Definitely seems suspicious, to say the least."
Finally, in first place, we have the 2004 series of spottings. On November 14th of 2004, Lieutenant Alex Dietrich was piloting her FA-18 Super Hornet when she observed an oblong object hovering over the water. It leapt into motion, skimming 500 to 1,000 feet over the waves at around 500 knots, and for those of us Canadian civilians, that's around 925 kilometers per hour. The fighter jet's onboard radar couldn't detect the object, but Alex's weapons system operator in the rear seat, who, her name's not public, witnessed it as well. Dietrich has quoted her recollection as, "We were trying to call out what we are seeing to each other and to make sure everybody else is seeing it. It's moving so erratically and so fast that our voices, our minds, and then our radio calls can't keep up with it." The majority of credible modern-day UFO sightings can be credited to those that work in the Air Force, and it should be noted that military pilots are trained at what they call REAS, short for reconnaissance, and referring more specifically in this case to the art of recognizing aircraft by their shapes, paint schemes, unit insignia, and more. On one of the other Super Hornets that launched behind Alex was Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, who was able to capture the object on an infrared camera. It was 40 feet long, round and smooth, and quickly received the nickname Tic Tac. Now, I'll let the footage that the US government has confirmed as authentic and unexplained speak for itself, since I know we have the clip handy. Around this time, starting on November 10th to be exact, Gary Voorhees, a petty officer on the USS Princeton guided missile cruiser, had been reporting apparitions on his radar screens in the same area. Triple checking his equipment before he made his report, and being the main technician responsible for the equipment, along with having 6 years of Navy experience at the time, Voorhees described what he was seeing as impossible. In just seconds, an object had dropped to the waterline from 60,000 feet, hovered, and then zipped away at high velocity, making right-angle turns that were quoted as being confounding and defying gravity. Calm down, Wicked fans, I know what I said. The objects returned for the next week, with Voorhees quoted as saying, "I was able to see it on the horizon during the night and during the day, and it was definitely a glowing object. Could I tell you for 100% certainty what it was we were tracking? No." Now, footage of this event used to exist, with Gary being able to vividly describe his memories, but has since been completely scrubbed from the internet. Now, where have I heard that before?
Number 5. The uninvited house guests. Our first tale of the day comes from a woman in South Australia who was having a boring and typical day, getting the cleaning done and just generally living her life, when she suddenly found that she was not alone and that there were strange creatures unlike anything she had ever seen in her home. This is her story in her own words. "I don't wish to give my name. I was a teacher in South Australia for many years. In 1976, I was hoovering my sitting room floor at about noon. Suddenly, I felt quite ill and thought I was going to be sick. So, I sat down on the sofa to see if the sick feeling would subside. I then saw that I was not alone. There were 3 strange little people standing alongside the sofa, just looking at me. I froze with fear, as I had never seen anything like them before, not even in films. 2 of them were short and fat, about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, with broad faces and enormous black eyes, but with only a hint of where a nose or mouth might have been, almost like a pencil drawing. They had wispy bits of brown hair at the back of their heads, and they were wearing brown shrouds or robes. These beings, I knew instinctively, were the workers. The other being was female, thin and about 5 feet tall. She wore a black shroud and had black wispy hair at the back of her head. Her face was very elongated, with huge, dark, piercing eyes. Like the others, there was just a hint of where a nose or mouth should have been. The thin one started to speak to me with her mind and told me I was to go with them. I said in my own mind that I would not go. Somehow, this telepathic communication seemed perfectly normal at the time, and I felt quite comfortable communicating like that. I was very frightened, but I could still communicate and understand. I was so frightened because it seemed they were pulling me away with their minds. I had to struggle to resist them. At one point, I remember falling down and trying to crawl towards the door. I must have fainted or something, because I have no memory from that point onwards. When my husband came home at the usual time, I realized that I had lost about 4 hours. I still have no explanation for this experience. Did this woman really do psychic battle with aliens in her living room? Or did she simply suffer some kind of temporary insanity that caused her to hallucinate and lose time? Regardless of the answer, the experience caused her to feel true terror almost beyond description, whether the cause was real or not. Number 4. Honk if you love alien Jesus. Next up, we have a minister who believes that he is in contact with strange aliens who are dedicated to spreading the word of love and peace throughout the universe. As he put it, "I wish to remain anonymous because I am a minister of the Baptist Church in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and some people might think that what I have experienced is against religion. I have had 3 meetings with humanoid beings from the planet Koshnak, located in the vicinity of the constellation of Orion. Their vehicles can travel in space and can also somehow pass through our planet. These beings appeared to me to have melon-shaped, completely expressionless faces, with thin lips, tiny noses and ears, and extremely large eyes without pupils. Their eyes are green, with scintillating flashes. Their expression in the eyes is intense. They always seem friendly. One of them is called Ohenesto, and he is the one who mainly communicates with me. This is a kind of telepathic communication. He tries to explain complicated ideas of time and space to me. He has told me that they travel in the 7th and 8th dimensions, which are unknown to Earth humans. These beings are aware of 13 dimension. Their lifespan is about 800 to 1,000 of our years. They can continue life forever with only one cell of their body. They are beings of other dimensions, of other worlds, but they are not gods. From time immemorial, teachers of light came to our planet from other planets, from other systems, even from other galaxies and realms, known to us as the non-physical or supernatural realms of existence. Great companies of light came into incarnation on our Earth, carrying with them the message of truth and love and light. I believe that our Lord Jesus Christ is one of these beings. Number 3. Alien Dance Party. Next, we have a rather strange tale from a man who claims that when he was young, he was transported to a pavilion filled with aliens who were having an intergalactic sock hop. Is this truth or madness? I'll let you be the judge. When I was young, I had some very strange experiences which affected my entire life. This was in the 1930s. In 1935, I had pneumonia, which in those days was a dangerous and sometimes fatal disease. One evening, right at the dark, 2 beings came to the window in an elongated envelope. They and their conveyance were like the Northern Lights. They asked me to go with them, and each took a hand. When they touched me, it was like being lightly tickled. Very pleasurable. The odd part was that you could see through them, but they were there, and we talked without sound. They took me to a huge pavilion where couples were dancing. My impression was that the males were dressed in black and white trim. The females were dressed the opposite way. There was no ceiling, but crystals hung above and made music beyond comparison that sounded to me like wind chimes. I had 3 visits to this place in all. On the last visit, a female asked me why I was afraid of the dark. She said to me that both the light and the dark are my benefactors, and they would make them equal. She took a crystal and placed it in the palm of my left hand. For a moment, it resembled the Star of David, 2 triangles. Then it melted and ran between my fingers. After that, my night vision changed. My eyes would adjust quickly so that I could see even when it was pitch black. I recovered quickly from my illness. A few months later, on a camping trip, I found I was the only one awake late at night, watching undulating shafts of bright light. The shafts of light began a strange, seemingly patterned movement. I was trying to puzzle this out when suddenly there appeared my transparent envelope in what looked like an oval cylinder. It just seemed correct to get in. In an instant, I was inside the pavilion again, but the beings were not dancing as before. They seemed to be conversing silently, but not with me. A female asked me to step up on the dais, because I was their conductor. Number 2. The Secrets of the Universe Revealed. This next story features a man who made the acquaintance of an alien race who taught him about the building blocks of our very universe, which was pretty cool of them. This is his story. I am a graphic designer with a good visual memory. What I saw was visually very vivid, but it doesn't make much sense. However, it may have been the most important thing that ever happened to me. In November 1980, my wife and I were driving north of Dundee when suddenly I saw a cerulean blue light pointing at our car from the sky. After that, I have a fragmented memory. We both have a fragmented memory of some bizarre events, but there are a lot of gaps. Basically, we somehow lost about an hour's time. I remember seeing a hairless, tall, man-like being in a blue robe. He was looking at us, inviting us aboard his craft telepathically. His costume struck me as absurd. He was the leader in a blue cape. The cape looked stupid, illogical. He was mentally luring us up to the spacecraft. Somehow, the next thing was, we were on board a ship of some kind, being examined, quite painlessly, by another being wearing a yellow robe with ruffled collar. Also, somehow completely absurd, incongruous. Suddenly, the examination process turned nasty. I felt my mind was being forcibly invaded. I had no control. My brain felt like there was a tunnel that goes through my mind to theirs. Our minds are connected. It could have been a tube or a tunnel of light, gray-brown. It was horrible. It pulled everything out of my head. There was a terrible sound, piercing, high-pitched. My thoughts had turned to goo, but I could see them visually. They had my mind, but I still had it too. Then it seemed as though I was okay again, but I felt completely different mentally. I can't explain this, but there's more to it than anyone knows. There's more to life, more to the world. There's more to everything than anybody knows. More dimensions than things coexisting. There are many more than 3 dimensions. Everywhere, it all works together. Everything coexists. I still can't explain all these thoughts, where they came from, and so on. Number 1. A UFO sighting. To end our compilation, I have selected a story of a UFO sighting. Not really much else to say about it. Let's dive in. My name is John Healy. At the time of making this officially transcribed statement, I was a detective with the Cleveland Police Department. I was also a U.S. Army reservist, training as a flight medic. The incident occurred when I was traveling on a helicopter with 3 other reservists on the evening of October 18th, 1973, about 10:30 p.m. We were halfway between Columbus and Cleveland, near Ashland, when the crew chief saw a red light on the horizon. He asked the pilot if there were any towers around there, and was told there were not. As we went along at an altitude of about 3,000 feet, the light seemed to be growing brighter and brighter. It appeared to be on a collision course with us. It kept coming right at us. The pilot had to put our helicopter into a power dive to avoid it. We were looking right through the windshield, watching this thing, and it damn near came to a stop right over us. It just hovered for a while. We all got a very good look at it. It had a steady red light on its prow. It was cigar-shaped. There were no wings on it. It made no noise, created no air turbulence, shining down out of aft end. It shone down and on us, and you could see a definite cone shape, the shape of the green light beam. I've seen aircraft from PT-I-9s up to C-5As, so I know an aircraft when I see one at night. But this thing scared the living hell right out of me. We contacted Mansfield Airport and told them we were almost in a collision collision with an unidentified flying object operating at 3,000 feet and 600 knots. Mansfield never acknowledged our broadcast. We tried to get a hold of Cleveland Airport and we couldn't until the object passed over us. It continued to the west, picked up speed, and we lost it over the horizon. We never saw it again. We talked about this sighting all the way back and we just couldn't dope it out. The thing didn't have wings, but at 3,000 feet, you have to have wings to stay aloft. It couldn't have been a dirigible or a Zeppelin because those things don't move at the speed this thing moved. Clandestine aircraft wouldn't operate at that speed at that low an altitude. All four of us filed official reports.
Number 5. Weird signal from the Milky Way. Astronomers have been studying fast radio bursts, or FRBs, that's a little acronym there to make me sound smart, for decades outside of our galaxy in the hopes of someday making some contact with our extraterrestrial friends and saying hello. Well, decades of research might have paid off when on April 28th, 2020, 2 ground-based radio telescopes discovered an intense pulse of radio waves within the Milky Way. This event was the first time an FRB had ever been detected within the galaxy, and somehow, despite this burst only lasting for a millisecond, it was apparently almost impossible to miss. I know what all of these words mean for sure. The burst was 30,000 light years away from Earth, so, you know, about a stone's throw up that way, really just a block away on the cosmic scale. It was first discovered by the CHIME, a fancy acronym for the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, as well as another project, the STARE, the Survey for Transient Astronomical Radio Emission. I just woke up, man, and I don't really know what these acronyms mean either, but I'm having a lot of fun saying them for you, and I hope you enjoy that. This discovery was notable as well for being the most energetic radio blast these astronomers have ever seen, but it was also one of the closest. Usually when we're talking about radio frequencies all the way up in space, these things are like billions of years of light years away, which does not make them particularly easy to study. You know, you're getting a real far away glance. But if there's one on our doorstep, way easier to focus on. So what is this weird signal coming out of the Milky Way? Is this aliens trying to send a text and the reception's a bit foggy? Here's the trouble. Astronomers don't know for sure just yet. 3 years later, we are still not 100%. There is a small possibility, a disappointing one, that this signal could be man-made somehow and it's broadcasting all the way out here. But if not, this could very well be a promising sign of life from across the galaxy. And if you're looking for more alien content, we have got more UFO sightings than probably any other YouTube channel on this site, and I'm like pretty sure of that. But if space stuff ain't your jam, we got cryptids, monsters, mythologies, true crime, fake crime stories, too good to be true and too true to be good. So click through, stay subscribed, stay screaming, and stay watching this video, okay? All the way to the end. I got a little surprise for you, I promise. Alright, moving on. Number 4, the sounds of Ganymede. Have you ever heard a planet talk? I don't mean like going for a hike and communing with trees and talking to nature or anything like that, man, okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like literally hearing the sounds a planet produces. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I am not a rocket scientist. I'm barely even a YouTube host. But as I understand, when Juno, a NASA satellite, was orbiting Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons, NASA discovered that Ganymede had its own magnetosphere. Ganymede was radiating this strange plasma wave of energy that when it is recorded and played back sounds absolutely terrifying. This really like tickles the H.P. Lovecraft fan in my heart to be able to hear the sounds a planet is making out in the cosmos. So we're gonna play it for you now. Just take a listen to the audio of this and try to ever sleep again. I dare you. I found that pretty scary personally. I don't know, reminds me of my insignificance in the galaxy, but more than a few people on YouTube pointed out, if you just close your eyes and imagine that that's R2-D2 making all of those noises, it's not particularly scary at all, and I'm probably never gonna be able to unhear that. So is this proof of alien life hiding out inside of Jupiter's moon? Well, not quite. This is a natural phenomenon. It's definitely mysterious though, and it makes you think about the size of the cosmos and how small we are on a galactic scale, but other than that, this thing coming from Ganymede is explainable, if not a little bit confusing. I just wanted to toss it like smack dab in the middle of this list about alien speculation to keep things a little fun, fresh, and flirty for everybody. Number 3, the USS Jellyfish. That's That's a fun name, isn't it? That's kind of fun. The USS Jellyfish kind of calls to mind like a big ship, maybe like a cruise ship taking an all-included trip through the Bahamas. Well, not to burst your dreams of an island getaway, but the actual USS Jellyfish is a celestial object that astronomers have found that has had them asking questions that are really stinging. That was forced. That was really forced. That was not natural at all. I'm sorry. The USS Jellyfish is a giant mass of plasma that has taken the shape of a jellyfish. At least that's the best way we can see it. It's kind of like an ink blot test. You see what you want to see. It's some 300 million light years away and is a fancy radio signal called a polyphoenix, which is a term scientists use for a radio frequency up in space that they don't really have all the answers about. The giant blob in particular is so unusual that when astronomers initially discovered it, they were writing it off completely, assuming it was an accident or an error in their data. The researcher who first discovered it, one Torrance Hodgson, captured the subject in 2017 using the Murchison Wide Array, an incredibly powerful Australian ground telescope. And when he wrote on the subject, he told his colleagues, ignore the obvious bug in this data. And it was only when they were really pushing that they began to notice there was something more to it than these formal studies earlier suggested. Now, I'm gonna be honest. The full-scale implications of the space jellyfish are a little bit above my pay grade. I can kind of just look at it and be like, well, that's kind of weird. I can read to you the scientists, theories for what they think created the jellyfish, but just know I only kind of half know what I'm talking about here. Scientists believe that the jellyfish was formed over the course of 2 billion years, structured smack dab in the middle between two galaxies that have been spewing out enormous amounts of light and plasma due to intense interactions between black holes and any materials that end up falling around them, eventually creating one gigantic cosmic jellyfish floating around in the astral planes. Number 2, something unusual. Recently, a team of astronomers discovered something unusual while they were mapping out the universe, which is my favorite start to a point I have ever read on this channel. You guys know when you're mapping out the universe, then you accidentally see something unusual? Ugh, I absolutely hate when that happens. Anyway, this mysterious unusual object floats about 4,000 light years away, very close by. You can practically wave and see it. And it's pulsing strange bursts of energy out of it roughly every 20 minutes on the dot. You can set your watch to this. Somebody up in space forget to turn the oven timer off? Natasha Hurley Walker is an astrophysicist from the Curtin University in Australia, same university that discovered that jellyfish coincidentally, and was the leading researcher on this study. She said in a public statement that this object was appearing and disappearing over a few hours during our observations, and said that it was completely unexpected. It was kind of spooky for an astronomer because there's nothing known in the sky that does that. Let me take over for a second right here and tell you right now, on Top 5 Scary, if you can't tell what something weird is in the sky, it's an alien. Okay? You got an alien on your hands. So we have to assume that's what's going on here. Alongside this bizarre cosmic alarm clock, the team discovered a fossil plasma source, something that was created by powerful blasts of a bygone black hole that has since faded into the darkness. And I loved saying that. A black hole that has faded into the darkness? That's poetic. Does that not sound like where the heart of like cosmic evil in the universe would be? Does that not sound a little bit like it's something out of a Lovecraft or Stephen King book? A fossilized plasma created by the blast of a black hole that has faded into the darkness? That sounds like something a guy in a black robe would read out as part of a prophecy for the end of the universe. And number 1, Proxima Centauri. If there was ever going to be concrete signs of alien life, I think it would definitely come from a place called Proxima Centauri. Listen to that. That already sounds like it's from like a great Deep Space Nine episode. Recently, astronomers exploring for signs of life beyond Earth discovered a currently unexplained radio signal that was broadcasting from Proxima Centauri, a small red star roughly 4.2 million light years away. That's like right next door, man. If this wasn't exciting enough for you, there's radio signals coming from a strange star that no one can explain seemingly. And surrounding these stars is a planet that NASA believes has a temperate and rocky surface just like our beautiful Earth, leading to some wild speculation all around. The project is dubbed Breakthrough Listen, very cool code name, and it was a decade-long search for alien broadcasts from the nearest million stars, just in case anybody's been trying to reach us about our planet's extended warranty. This radio signal in question has been formally dubbed BLC-1 when referred to scientifically. Now, this signal was first discovered in May 2019. it's not quite the be-all and end-all proof of aliens just yet, as much as I want it to be. Sophia Sheik, the team member leading Breakthrough Listen, says she suspects that the broadcast could end up being human in origin somehow, theorizing that it could be something as simple as like a plane traveling overhead their equipment, or faulty electronics somewhere getting wires tangled. Would that not be beyond embarrassing if you're a group of scientists, astronomers, and you think you found proof of alien life, but all it is somebody forgot to take their phone off airplane mode and they've just been getting notifications for Candy Crush and it's messing with your equipment? Still, it's something to research, and it's still one of the most exciting things to happen in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in a long time. And I hope we keep looking for extraterrestrial intelligence out there, because there sure ain't anybody down here. I messed up that joke. Number 5. The Barney and Betty Hill incident. The case of Barney and Betty Hill has puzzled UFO enthusiasts for generations and is considered one of the most well-documented, well-discussed UFO abduction stories, and also President Obama's favorite. He's making a documentary on it. In 1961, a young couple, Betty and Barney Hill, were driving home through New Hampshire when they saw a bright light flying through the sky. 2 hours later, they found themselves back in their driveway without knowing what had happened, confused, shocked, and afraid. The couple claimed that they traveled to a star system 39 light years from Earth, Zeta Reticuli. Before this point, there weren't really many widespread stories of abductions in the United States, so this story caught on wildly. As they were driving home, the couple noticed something bright in the sky. Feeling dizzy and drowsy, the two of them found themselves asleep and waking up in their driveway, completely lost as to how they got there. When they'd awoken, Betty was convinced that they'd experienced a close encounter and went to Air Force to report their sightings. They would spend the next 2 years explaining their case to various government officials and medical professionals. Mr. Barney Hill would go on to recount to a psychiatrist that he was having nightmarish, repetitive dreams. He would recall these creatures with slanted eyes and gray skins that took them on board and experimented on them by taking samples of their flesh and hair. The two underwent hypnosis therapy from a licensed psychologist in a hopes to uncover what they could have experienced and repressed. And shockingly, Betty Hill was able to draw a map of the stars seemingly from memory, a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli. The map was nearly spot on, a near perfect recreation of the stars surrounding the actual solar system. This event would end up leading to the Air Force launching Project Blue Book, the clandestine program to research UFO and abduction stories and investigate just what's out there. And if you're looking for more UFO content, even stuff on Project Blue Book, we've got all of that and then some. Come take a look through at all the declassified files, stories of abductions, sightings, close encounters, and way more. So stay subscribed, stay scared, but more importantly, stay watching this video. I worked hard on it. We got lots more abduction stories coming up for you in just a second. Number 4. Terrell Copeland. For some, too many abduction stories come from a disreputable source, you know? Well, our next story comes from a former United States Marine, Terrell Copeland, a man who'd seen the brink and back and had never been shook like this before in his life. Pop those ears open and take a listen. Copeland reported this in 2007. He was living in his Virginia apartment when he saw an orb of white light across the street and hovering in the air, some 300 meters above the ground and changing colors rapidly. Now, Terrell had the same reaction most people like you and I might have seeing a glowing, colorful disco ball in the sky, and he thought, well, that's kind of weird, something's wrong. So he recorded it, posted footage online, and claims this is where his life took a dark turn. He was taking a nap in his apartment, and he said it sounded as if someone was breaking in. He called out into the darkness, asking who was invading his space, and he saw the doorknob move and heard scratching at his door. He grabbed a firearm that he kept in his apartment and went to go ready it, but found himself completely frozen, unable to move no matter how bad he wanted to. He claims he heard a voice that spoke to him, internally, as if it was his own thoughts, saying, "You don't need to do that. We won't harm you." I'm pretty sure if I heard that from inside my head, I would leap out my window just to be safe and take my chances somersaulting down the road, because I'm probably safer there. Now, doctors thought this incident was sleep paralysis, a condition in which one can experience vivid auditory and visual hallucinations during a period of insomnia and even freeze up. But Copeland would complain of hours missing that he couldn't remember. He said there was a span of about 4 hours over the course of 2 nights that he couldn't remember a single second of. So Copeland began to keep notes and sketches of his memories as he started to have these blocked memories resurfacing. He claimed that he saw a person with an elongated skull and pitch black eyes, and said he had a vivid memory of standing on a balcony waving at a cylinder-shaped ship. On a positive note for all of this, Copeland says that he doesn't believe this incident has haunted him, but feels that it's made him a better person and asking more questions, and it's definitely given him a story to tell at parties. Number 3. Frederick Valentich. Frederick Valentich was an Australian pilot. He was well trained, and he was an avid enthusiast of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Lucky for him, he might have seen one. Sadly for him, it was the last time anyone saw him. It was 1978, and Frederick disappeared over his 125 nautical mile training flight over the Australian mainland. While at 4,500 feet in the air, Valentich reported that there was an unidentifiable craft following behind him. Melbourne Flight Services insisted that there wasn't any other aircraft in the space with him, but Frederick replied back, "No, there's something on my tail." He described it as glowing with 4 repeating bright lights and rushing past him. Valentich said it was shiny, metallic, and chrome, and he was on radio with air control for 5 minutes before he started mysteriously experiencing engine trouble. The flight controller asked him again what was following him. Valentich responded, "It's hovering and it is not an aircraft." And this was the last thing anyone ever heard from Frederick Valentich. Authorities were completely unable to recover his craft, and after an intense search, threw their shoulders up at a loss. A local farmer alleged that he had seen a strange flying object in the sky the same day as Valentich's disappearance. The farmer went on to explain that he claims he saw the plane attached to this UFO. He told officials that he was scared to tell anyone about what he had seen for fear he would be the town laughingstock if he was a farmer raving about a UFO. Tragically, in the end, we're no closer to understanding what happened to Frederick now than we were all those years ago in 1978. Did Frederick get his wish? Did he get to see an alien up close? Did they take him back to the stars? Or who knows? And we may never know. I don't know. Number 2. Travis Walton. Alien abduction stories can be a little much sometimes. I'm sure you can agree. Even for those with very open minds, you know, they all seem kind of the same, and usually you can poke holes through them and find all the little weird details that don't add up. Well, take a listen to this one. Travis Walton's story is one of the most famous abduction examples on record. You might be familiar with it before if you study UFO stuff a lot. I've covered it a few times on this channel before because I think it is one of the most fascinating abduction stories. So let's hear it. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger on an otherwise unremarkable day. And he was with 6 other loggers driving around in the forest when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed that it looked like a flattened saucer. Walton stepped out of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that had knocked him backward. This startled the rest of the crew, who drove off in a flurry. And it's a great way to find out who your real friends are. Your real friends are not the guys who leave you in the woods where you're about to get abducted. I wouldn't do that to you. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Travis awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because suddenly he found himself in a blindingly bright, sterile room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he realized something was very wrong. 3 feet tall, brown quarter-sized pupils, and marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, I think as most of us probably would do, and was restrained by his captors. He fought them off, but was greeted by a tall creature that he said resembled human, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, kind of a Darth Vader deal. This masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room, put a translucent mask over his face, while Walton drifted out of consciousness over and over again, unsure if anything that was happening was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually found his way to a phone and called for his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days. He was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked right out of existence, and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was absolutely real, an abduction, and he's maintained this ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you really think this story is fascinating, and you wish you could have seen some footage of what Travis described, unfortunately he didn't bring his camcorder. You can, however, watch a 90s movie directly based off the case called Fire in the Sky. It's on Amazon Prime or something, I'm sure. And finally, number 1, the Berkshire incident. Now here's the thing with most UFO sightings. They're isolated scenarios, you know? One sleep-deprived night watchman sees something weird out the corner of his eye. Somebody up way too late sees something up in the sky. It's hard to believe just one person's story. That's why it's significantly harder to write off the experience of Berkshire County, where half the town reported seeing the same UFO. Uncanny and unprecedented. 200 150 residents and more all reported seeing the same UFOs flying across the night sky. So it was 1969. Multiple residents across town spotted blinding lights above Sheffield in the southern Berkshires. Witnesses reported that the lights they saw were beaming from saucers, bright lights onto the horizon. Some residents said that they felt that time was slowing down as they watched the object, claiming that it left them frozen and stunned, wondering just what it was they were looking at. One witness comes from a young student, one Thomas Reed, who said that he saw one of the floating entities, a glowing orb, dashing outside the forest. He claims he heard an eruption of crickets and frogs and a loud deafening sound, and then inexplicably 2 hours had passed without anyone understanding why or how. His mother and grandmother had switched car seats as well. Now, as an adult, Thomas Reed claims that over time his family has corroborated what had happened to them. He speaks of being in this immensely large, almost infinitely spanning metal hangar with hallways and hallways stretching out forever. Thomas Reed took a polygraph test telling this story and was found to be 99.1% truthful. Multiple people across Berkshire that day reported similar stories: balls of light, flying saucers, losses of time, finding themselves somewhere they couldn't explain. The residents of Berkshire may never get to the bottom of what happened there, but I know the truth is out there. And I know Top 5 Scary is gonna find it, I'm pretty sure.
Number 5. Hypnotic regression. Many people who claim to have been abducted by aliens are unable to remember a lot of the specific details of their abductions. Because of this and the public stigma against people with alien experiences, many people choose to never come forward, or their stories are written off as delusion. But in the spirit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, let's talk about a certain woman's experience with hypnotic regression. A woman who claims she was abducted by aliens was put under hypnosis in order to give a documentary crew information about the visitors from other worlds. When asked how aliens are able to travel at such incredible speeds, she responded with the following: "I can't explain it, but it's like if they want to get from one point to another point, they remove what's in between, so they don't have to travel that distance. They are instantly from there to there." When asked why aliens are studying humans, the response was, "They are very wary of humankind. Mankind is progressing technology-wise, and soon he's going to come across technology that will allow him to peel back the layers of dimensions. And they want to know all about man for their own benefit. Man's warlike, aggressive, an animal. He's in possession of technology that is more than he is. There's no balance. And they're very wary that he's now on the threshold of many breakthroughs, one of which is peeling back dimensions. It's like an onion skin. You peel back one layer, and there's another one underneath, and another one underneath, and another one underneath. The same with dimensions. They're scared. Do aliens really study humanity out of a fear of what we will do once we discover interdimensional travel? And if so, how do they feel about all the UFOs we have apparently shot down? What do species historically do with groups that they are afraid of? What fate awaits the human race at the hands of these interplanetary visitors? Number 4. Sam the Sandown Clown. Our next story comes from the January-February edition of the British UFO Research Association Journal and concerns an anonymous man going by the alias of Mr. Y, who claims that one October night in the year 1970, he was driving to visit a friend when he saw something hovering over the swamp to his right. It was a huge UFO with several different multicolored orb-like lights brightly illuminating the craft. He got out of his vehicle to observe the craft for a moment and then continued on his way. He looked out his window and realized that the craft was now following him, its lights spinning. Mr. Y got to his friend's house, and the friend was amazed at the guests that had followed him there, before disappearing into a nearby tree line. For years, Mr. Y would see the red orbs following him from time to time, watching him and stalking him. Doubting that anyone would believe him, he kept these encounters to himself, until 1973, when his 7-year-old daughter Faye and her friend were playing near Lake Common Road when they heard an eerie wailing sound. They followed the sound to a nearby meadow, and the wailing stopped. They walked over a small bridge when suddenly a blue-gloved hand with 3 fingers appeared from under the bridge. They looked in the small river and saw a strange figure standing in the middle holding a book. He was described as being 7 feet tall and without a neck. He was wearing an odd and tattered costume consisting of a green tunic with a red collar, white pants, and a pointed hat with a black ball on top, and 2 antennae. He had a pale white face, lips that never moved, red hair, and triangle holes for eyes. The children watched in shock as the figure hobbled over to a strange metal hut. Not long after, they saw the figure again as he wailed, and then spoke into a microphone asking if they were still there. He then communicated by writing in his book, saying that his name was Sam. They asked if he was a man, and he said no. They asked if he was a ghost, and he said, well, not really, but in a way I am. He said that there were others like him, and that he was afraid of being attacked by humans. He invited them into his metal hut, which was filled with wooden furniture and elaborate knobs. The children hung out with Sam for an hour before leaving, and a year later, she told her father about the encounter, telling him that there had been men nearby fixing a post who had acted as though they could not see the strange creature. He had trouble believing her, but he had had enough experiences with aliens of his own that he had to consider the possibility that it was real. Did Mr. Y's daughter really see a strange alien in the woods, or is this just the overactive imagination of a child? In an age where spacecraft are being seen all over the world at an alarming rate, we really can't rule anything out. And what of the UFO stalking Mr. Y? What were they hoping to see, and why was he selected to be the subject of their curiosity? This mystery will likely never be fully unraveled. Number 3. Aliens take a baby. Our next entry comes courtesy of phantomsandmonsters.com and describes a 14-year-old visiting the home of some seniors and seeing something more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. As they themselves told it, I witnessed an alien abduction back in 2002 when I was 14. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and rode my bicycle to their house. I got there and clouds appeared, so I decided to make this a pretty quick visit. I set up the computer and installed some software for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 6 years old, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. It was odd, as all the doors and windows were shut. The grandparents looked towards the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray alien creatures, with thicker necks than usually described, with the eyes closer to the sides of their heads. They wore silver jumpsuits. In between them was a taller creature that looked like a humanoid mantis, wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room, and a minute later returned with the robed creature, carrying the granddaughter in its arms. It's looking at me, and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. The grandparents were looking at them too, but not doing anything. I thought, screw this, and fought off all the fear I could and clumsily charged towards them. I didn't even make 3 steps before the grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden, a light stretched around them and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back," soon I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle home as fast as I could while looking back, hoping that nothing was following me. I didn't sleep that night after I got home. The next day I told my friend what had happened, and she told me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The granddaughter was brought back after a few hours. Not long after I witnessed this incident, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claimed to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit. Why are aliens taking babies away from their families? What are they hoping to learn? And is there some way to stop them? One can hope, but it seems unlikely. Number 2. Dream or abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, in July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body, like I was drugged with something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put the tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders, and they don't have fingernails. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks, so small and thin it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in the chair with my head and jaw held by something so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there, but then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum. In a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up a screen like a hologram. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. He spoke with a gray person on the holo screen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. This man was obviously military of some sort judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holo screen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and next thing I know, I fell on top of my bed with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Was this a real alien abduction or simply a horrible nightmare? Typically, I would think it was merely a bad dream, but the user describes extreme pain in his throat for days afterwards from the tube being forced into him. What was the source of this pain if it was simply a dream? Truly a strange encounter to contemplate. Number 1. The Alien and the Bassinet. Our final story is another from phantomsandmonsters.com about a woman who was asleep in bed next to her baby's bassinet before waking up and seeing something that would make any mother panic. The following is an excerpt from her account. "I turned over on my side, facing the bassinet, and noticed a bright light coming in between the window blinds. I thought out loud, is it morning already? The light was coming in between the blinds and it was so bright, but the rest of the room was dark. There was also a bright light on the wall next to the window, and I looked up to see where the light was coming from. To my horror, just above the bassinet was an alien's gray face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was dark in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, and there was a small slit for a mouth. The nostrils were small, but the eyes were large and almond-shaped and very shiny black. It had some sort of glass lamp on the top of its head. The light on the wall was projected from the lamp. Then I noticed that the being was looking down at my baby daughter. Oh my god, I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard that I started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me and realized I was looking at it. The being moved towards me and I started screaming and swinging my arms. I remember that I screamed out loud for it to leave. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face, and then in a dreamlike manner, I heard a cooing sound similar to mourning doves. I had the feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. The woman then describes waking up with a sore spot on her head and the alien being gone without a trace. She insists it was not a dream and that she really saw an alien creature that she believes will one day return. For her sake, let us hope it was simply a dream.
Number 5. Strange things in the skies. Now, I know I talked about this in a previous video, and if you're a really good Top 5 Scary fan, maybe you'll recognize some of these. But since I aired that last video, way more weird stuff has happened, so it only seems fitting that we'd run through it once again. Starting on February 10th, yours truly's birthday by the way, there was a pattern of incredibly bizarre happenings in the skies, and some very, very dodgy answers from government officials who refused to confirm or deny anything, which always seems more suspicious than less. So here's a quick Cole's Notes play-by-play of the last few weeks. On February 10th, US fighter jets brought down a still unidentified object over the coast of Alaska. This object has not been confirmed what it is at all or identified, but it's been confirmed as not being a balloon. Okay, that's one thing, only 1 million left to go. One official referred to it as being the size of a small car, which is definitely beyond strange. You think you would see that flying around? This single event would probably be enough to set tinfoil hats on fire and keep me in business for the next few years making videos about conspiracies, but the literal next day on February 11th, a UFO was shot down over Canada, around the Yukon. That's the big territory up on the left, right by Alaska. A US fighter jet downed this one, and it was described as being smaller than the first and cylindrical in nature, which is gonna come up a few times before this video is done, so hold on to that thought, there's still more. February 12th, we had something bizarre shot down over Lake Huron. An object that first appeared over Montana reappeared on Sunday before being shot down with an octagonal structure and strings hanging off of it, but it wasn't carrying anything, which is bizarre. And then over Billings, Montana, there was something very bizarre that was seen falling from the sky, leaving a thick orange chemtrail, and residents were left in the dark about it. Local residents wondered just what it was, and some Redditors in a group noticed around the area that there had been an increased military presence since the sighting. So just what is going on around here, there, and just about everywhere? But if you can't wait at all, and you just want to watch alien videos all day, I agree with you. That's what I do every single day, and it's a great way to live. We've got loads of alien and UFO vids, NASA conspiracies, all the things they don't want you to know. And if that ain't your jam, we got scary stories, horror movies, monsters, cryptids, true crime, just about everything spooky under the sun and above it. So stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary, but most importantly, stay scared. And keep watching this video because I got way more weird stuff coming up for you. Number 4, the Tom Delonge sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, then you know that one of the leading names in UFO research and discovery right now is Tom Delonge, the nasally voiced frontman for pop punk project Blink-182. And if you didn't know that, now you do. Although I suspect most of the people who watch our videos don't know that band. Anyway, little trivia for you. That's what he does when he's not selling out $300 concerts. He hunts aliens, and he's pretty good at it. If some of the footage he gathers is anything to go by, why don't you take a look at this weird footage he shared on his Instagram a couple days ago. It's gonna go right there. Pretty darn weird, huh? If that isn't one of the most clear, close encounters I've ever seen, I'm not sure what is. You can practically like trace the outline of the flying saucer. It looks like the platonic flying saucer, like the one we all imagine when we close our eyes. I can almost see the little green man inside. On his Instagram, Delonge wrote this caption: "Enjoy. They are real." To the Stars Media will be turning real events like these into major feature films and television series to bring the facts to the world. Note the whirling sound from the propulsion. Now, To the Stars is the fringe research company owned by Tom Delonge, hoping to spread information and explore the possibility of UFOs and UAPs, and it does also sound like it's a plan to get Tom Delonge some more money by making a cinematic alien universe. Whatever his endgame is though, can't deny the footage posted here is eerily compelling. Number 3, Gary McKinnon. Now, I've talked a bit about Gary McKinnon before on this channel because I am obsessed with this story. He's a notorious hacker who broke into NASA's security. His story is a cool one. I love anytime you hear someone pulling a fast one over a government agency like this, so it bears repeating. He's a genius computer hacker with a lot of spare time and wanted to know just what the Yanks were hiding from his home in Scotland. He wanted to go after NASA's data server to see if they had anything hidden they'd never told anybody about. Been called the biggest military hack of all time, so I'd wager maybe he found something. Why risk your life, career, freedom on this exactly? McKinnon claims he had received an insider tip that the US had reverse engineered technology from UFOs, free energy. In his own words, he said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills. And it's just like a bonus if you get some alien stuff on the side." So what did he find? McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble any he had ever seen in his life. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. He said he was in shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Well, there's those cylindrical shaped crafts again. I told you to keep thinking about them, and keep thinking about them again because they're going to show up one more time before this video is done. Well, that wasn't the only exciting thing he found. He also found something called the Disclosure Project, a 400-page document outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service recording sightings of unidentified objects, but that wasn't even the meal ticket. The real jewel was a document of a non-terrestrial officer's sheet. A spreadsheet listing the name of NASA agents to be transferred to new ships or serve on board space stations, but McKinnon noted that none of the names of the vessels existed in any database. Now, I don't know how much you know about the US government, but they absolutely love it when you poke holes in their important security, triply so if you do it from the comfort of your bedroom in a country away. The US tried their level best to extradite McKinnon, but we're prevented by the Crown from serving out a 70-year sentence. McKinnon's doing well. He recently took to the UFO subreddit to answer questions from fans and true believers. There wasn't a whole lot of new information, but it's just nice to know he hasn't been shoved into a black van somewhere. Number 2. The Navy and their pilots, Navy pilots. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher spoke out on 3 recently released videos by the Army that contained evidence of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Navy agreed that just this once, they would be willing to talk about something weird they'd seen and recorded because pilots are reportedly encountering bizarre things every day and feel just too uncomfortable to report it. One pilot in particular, Ryan Graves, who's a 10-year vet, has said he believes he's seen thousands of unexplained phenomena in the air in his career, but these go unreported because of the stigma attached to the previous theories about what may or may not be in the videos, in his words. To translate that a bit in layman's terms, the Navy feels that they have to comment so that pilots are willing to talk about that, hey, maybe we're seeing UFOs without feeling too crazy. These videos in question were released from 2017 to 2018 and they feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that disappear in the Earth's atmosphere. Hey, there it is again, more cylindrical-shaped UFOs. Now I'll be clear, I don't really have much of a connection or through line here, but I do think it's very fascinating how many of these stories do mention these cylindrical-shaped objects. Far from the earliest or last, in 2004 and in 2015, 2 similar sightings were reported featuring similar vehicles. Now the purpose of investigating most of these reports is more focused on safety hazards and threats of national security. And at the same time, maybe they're not openly admitting they've got UFOs flying around, but they're getting pretty darn close. The 2004 sighting I think is a particularly fascinating one. 2 pilots, one Commander Fravor and one Lieutenant Commander Slate, called it in, reporting that they saw objects out of nowhere at some 80,000 feet in the air and then descending rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, stopping at around 20,000 feet and hovering in place. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up in the sky on a 90-degree angle. You know, normal things aircrafts love to do. They weren't American crafts, and they weren't recognized by any organizations they'd ever seen. Maybe it's tech not of this world. Number 1. Government councils. You know, the era we're in right now is probably one of the most fascinating times to be invested in UFOs and unexplained alien sightings, so consider yourself lucky. Because it seems like we are getting dangerously close to a government finally confessing it. It feels like we're weeks away some days, you know? The UAP report was a seminal turning point when the Pentagon outright admitted they had thousands of documents and reports and investigations into the possibility of life somewhere out there in the Milky Way. Over the years, there have been a few investigations into unexplained aerial phenomena, but they're usually pretty hush-hush clandestine. Project Blue Book is probably the most famous secret project among them, but that was, you know, a secret. Well, in the interest of transparency, as of October 2022, NASA is coming clean, washing their hands, and opening a new study into the research of extraterrestrial life. 16 hand-picked scientists and specialists have been selected to analyze data and determine how best to go forward when observing events. And they're not really looking at past cases, they're more looking towards future things. And this project will include researchers, personnel from all divisions, including former astronaut Scott Kelly, who served as the pilot for the Discovery shuttle and also held the world record for most days in space. So I guess he probably knows 1 or 2 things about space, maybe, and I'm sure he's seen something weird. Kelly himself doesn't personally believe in aliens, saying, "I think there's probably intelligent life in the universe, but I don't think they visit planet Earth." Why not? We got lots of great stuff out here. We got water slides, we got Vin Diesel. No other planet has those 2 things, and I'm sure we got a couple other great things from the human experience, so aliens, come on down when you're ready. We'll welcome you with open arms, and if those were UFOs you sent, we're really sorry that we shot those down. I didn't have anything to do with that. Number 5. Hopkinsville. In 1955, 2 families in Hopkinsville told a story that would go down in infamy to UFO enthusiasts. They claimed that not only did they see a flying saucer soar right above their property, but that they engaged in a firefight against extraterrestrial invaders. Master Chief would be so proud. Let's take a listen to this wild story. So night was falling over Kelly, a rural area outside of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in the summer of '55. Billy Ray Taylor, and that's the most country name I've ever heard in my life, was taking a trip to the family well, and at the time he was staying with Glennie Lankford at their farmhouse alongside the Sutton family, who had all left the carnival life. and a quick aside before I get too distracted here, a bunch of carnival workers fighting aliens is absolutely the plot to a great direct-to-VHS 80s movie, I'm sure. Anyway, Billy Ray was outside gathering water when he saw a bright light shoot across the sky. Now, Billy Ray swore he saw a saucer above zipping through the clouds and landing behind a patch of trees. He told everybody back at the farm about a round metallic object with rainbow-colored streaks trailing behind it. Sounds a lot like my gamer desk. Now, Billy Ray was known to exaggerate, so at first no one really believed him, which I kinda get. I wouldn't really believe someone named Billy Ray either, unless he was talking about his heart. He convinced somebody else to go outside with him just to get some eyes on it, and they saw a glowing figure emerging from the woods. The pair then ran back to the house to arm themselves. They grabbed 22 LR rifles and claimed they saw something with an inhuman face pressing its nose against the window. They opened fire and claimed that the sounds of their bullets sounded like they were connecting with metal. Police investigated the next day and found no traces of any aliens, just discarded shells and casings. Now, since then, Hopkinsville has embraced this bit of folklore and now holds a festival dedicated to celebrating their alien visitors. Did they ever truly visit? I gotta say though, they're probably not gonna come back anytime soon if that's how we greet them. They were just trying to be friendly walking out in the woods and we shot at them. Ain't that human? And if you're looking for more terrifying tales of extraterrestrial horror, cryptids, ghouls, ghosts, and goblins, well, Top 5 Scary is the place for all of that and then some. So stay subscribed, and more importantly, stay scared. But also stay listening, because we got a lot more video to go. Number 4. The Men in Black. Our next encounter comes from a Redditor posting his story. His name is user UberoBob, and he details a bizarre encounter with the fabled Men in Black. No, not like the movies, but this is stranger than fiction. The Redditor describes being 26 years old in the summer of 2007. He was living at his parents' house at the time, and it was a stormy night, and he was staying in playing World of Warcraft. Awesome way to start a horror story. Makes it a lot more believable for me. He was finishing up one of the longest chain quests in the game, the opening of Anchorage, if there's any Azeroth heads out there, and the internet went out. And if you know anything about that quest line, you know how much that would devastate you. The Redditor was frustrated and beaten down, and he tried to investigate the internet to see if there was anything he could do to fix it, figuring it was knocked out by the storm. He then heard a smashing knock at his door. When he went to see who it was, he saw 3 incredibly tall, pale men dressed in all black suits, one of them holding a folder and another holding a device that looked like a Geiger counter. He opened the door and the man in front greets in a low, monotone voice. He asks the Men in Black what's going on, and they tell him that they need to check the water from the house's faucet. He's kind of confused, but he says sure, and from here all the lights in his house shut out, like pitch black, he says. The Men in Black tell him to stay calm. They turn on flashlights in their breast pockets, and as the light shines over the tallest one, the Redditor swears that he saw through the man's face, and saw a metal face underneath it. A moment later, the tallest says, "It's begun," and the Geiger counter begins going haywire. The Redditor says he felt excruciating pain all over his body and his vision beginning to blur, as he only sees white coming over him. He describes seeing his memories flash through him quickly, seeing the earth above the sky, and then feeling like he's falling, and then waking up in his bed drenched in sweat, thinking it was all just a terrible dream. Except when he checks the date on his computer, it's been a week since he was last awake. And when he checks inside his closet, the Geiger counter from before is there. So whatever happened, happened. But what happened? And who were they? Alien visitors? Government agents of the highest order? And did he ever end up finishing the opening of Anchorage? We may never know. Number 3, the Sandown Clown. Oh, that's fun to say. Give that a try at home. Sandown Clown. Oh, let me talk about a Sandown Clown. Okay, I'll do it serious. Our next entry is an obscure being whose mystery has taunted investigators for decades. The Sandown Clown. Sandown is a seaside resort near the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom. Of course the United Kingdom has an Isle of Wight. It's a popular tourist spot where tourists pass through every year through its shops, restaurants, and natural beauty. And while it's got a rich culture and history of its own, it's this one event in May 1973 that stood out and what we're talking about today. Like most good cryptid stories, the person who found the creature was a young girl and her playmate. The girl was named Faye, and the boy's name has remained anonymous over the years. The two of them were playing games near the lake in the daytime when they both heard a bizarre siren-like screech. The two of them went off to investigate because, you know, they're kids. I would just ignore a siren screech personally. And they reached a small marsh between the golf course and the airport. Under a small footbridge, they saw a mysterious hand appear. Now, according to the children, a hand wearing a blue glove appeared from under the bridge, followed by a book of some kind being dropped in the water. A figure appeared out of the water and scurried into a nearby hut. The children described this creature as walking with a strange hopping motion. They say that it screeched at them and it sounded like microphone feedback. They described the creature as being 7 feet tall with no neck. It wore a yellow hat with a round black knob on its top and strange antennae on the sides. The creature had triangular eyes, a square nose, and extremely white skin and red fringed hair. Clown found under a bridge? Near sewers? I don't really know how I feel about that. I feel like I've seen a clown under a bridge before, and it really didn't end well for that little boy. Upon being asked, it told the little girl that its name was Sam, and that it was all colors, whatever that means. When asked if it were a human, it said it wasn't, and when asked if it was a ghost, it is reported to have answered, well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way. All other questions about what it might have been, it only answered with, you know, classic. And since then, the mystery has never been solved. So what do you think it could have been? Alien visitor from another world? Strange cryptid? Very complicated prank? We may never know. Number 2. Valiant Thor. Now our next alien is a truly strange one. It starts as a UFO sighting and gets a lot weirder. According to the account in a 2001 book, Stranger at the Pentagon, on March 16th, 1957, someone identifying themselves as Valiant Thor came forward to the White House and introduced themselves as an envoy from the planet Venus. Now, normally you would not expect someone like that to get very far at all, in fact, not even get past the gate. But in Mr. Valiant Thor's case, allegedly this was enough to get him meetings with several high-profile members of the US government, going all the way up to President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon. The author Frank Stranges shares a report from Harley Andrew Bird, a man who worked a high-clearance position at the Pentagon that was involved with Project Blue Book, the Air Force program dedicated to UFO research. Well, Bird's department received a police report about somebody who'd been arrested in Virginia, who had proclaimed himself a space emissary, and instead of tossing him in an asylum, he was taken to the Pentagon immediately. Bird's account says that Thor landed in 1957 and spent a few years meeting various high-level officials all around the country. Presidents, world leaders, Elvis Presley, so on. The author Frank Stranges claims that he met Thor in 1959 at the Pentagon in the winter, beginning with Thor showing the men a shimmering garment that looked like sunshine made from alien materials. Oh, that just sounds delightful. He told them he was sent to Earth to protect humanity from annihilating themselves. And if you're watching this video, we haven't currently annihilated ourselves just yet from nuclear proliferation, so maybe Valiant Thor helped us out more than we realize. I know it's pretty fantastical, it's an out-of-this-world story, so let me know what you think. Fact or just total fiction? And finally, at the #1 spot is the Flatwoods Monster, a creature that is long since thought to be an alien in origin, and not a cryptid as some have said, and one of my favorite cryptid stories of all time. The Flatwoods Monster was first sighted in West Virginia because of course it was. That's where all the weird stuff lives in the United States. West Virginia is nothing but beautiful mountain landscapes and cryptids all the way down. John Denver left all that part out of his music. The Flatwood Monster was described as being 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as being more mechanical in nature than it's organic, kind of a Darth Vader deal going on. Its most notable feature is its giant head, 2 gigantic glowing eyes, described as either bright red or bright green, and it's got a big cowl in the shape of a spade behind its big old head, making it look like an alien vampire. Its body was armored with thick vertical pipes, and it's got spindly little arms. That's my favorite little part. The first ever sighting of the Flatwood Monster was in the 50s, 1952 to be specific. 3 boys saw something flailing out of the sky hitting the ground nearby. The boys went home and one of them told their mother that they thought they'd saw something fall from the sky, maybe an asteroid. And it's always a great idea to bring your mom if you think you're gonna go check out an alien. She'll know what to do. They gathered a small search party, just in case, and the group sought out to the farm where the object landed, and eventually made their way to the top of the hill, where they saw a large ball of fire and smelled some mist that was making their eyes burn. A person in the search party then noticed that there were 2 bright glowing green eyes that were floating around in the trees, and he flashed his light to unveil what was hiding in the dark. They were then treated to a full view of the Flatwoods Monster in all of its glory. The creature then hissed at them and flew upwards into the night, never to be seen again. Now, over the years, detractors have claimed that the Flatwood Monster could just have easily been the darkness, playing tricks on susceptible young eyes, and it might have just been a barn owl, and I do kind of see that. It's got a similar enough face shape, but I feel like the size would be hard to misunderstand. Plus, the mist that was making everybody's eyes burn, I don't know many owls that produce mist, and what fell from the sky. If you ask me, Flatwood sounds way more like it's an alien than it does that it's a barn owl. Number 5. The Navy pilots. Since the release of the UAP documents, the new nomenclature, UFO fever has been in the air more than ever since Roswell. We've got open confirmation that the US government, the Pentagon, is researching actively the possibility of alien craft outright. That's the craziest thing that's ever happened in my life. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher confirmed that 3 recently released videos by the military contain evidence of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Like, that's it. This is the Navy, the government pointing to a video and going, yeah, that's an unidentified flying object that we don't know about. They're not saying it's a weather balloon. They're not saying it's stars. They're not outright saying it's an alien, but they're certainly implying it. The Navy agreed that they would confirm the sightings this time because pilots encounter bizarre sightings all the time, but are usually too concerned to report the sightings because of the stigma attached to previous theories about what may or may not be in those videos. Put gently, it means that the Navy felt like they had to comment on this thing so that pilots would feel comfortable admitting that maybe they're seeing UFOs without feeling like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracist. The videos in question include reports from the STARS Academy of Arts and Sciences, released from 2017 to 2018. They feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that appear in the Earth's atmosphere before rapidly disappearing from view. Now, really interestingly here is these aren't the only pill-shaped cylindrical UFOs that have been spotted recently. There were 2 videos from 2015 that came out, and before that, there was a Navy case involving these in 2004, and even on the rest of this list, you'll see a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO in a sighting from the 40s. So this sort of thing does happen a lot. Now, the purpose of the Navy investigating all this stuff, it's more focused on safety hazard and threats of national security, but hey, at the same time, they may not be willing to talk about it so brazenly, but they definitely are checking just a little bit to make sure they are aliens. But they definitely know more than they're letting on. This footage released only makes up a tiny fraction of what the US Navy and other service branches encounter. One pilot, Lieutenant Graves, claims that in his 10 years flying for the Navy, he thinks he's probably encountered, I don't know, thousands of UFOs in his time. Those are his words. Now, who is to say how many of those might just actually be unidentified flying objects, birds, scouts, drones, whatever, but who's to say how many of them really were alien craft from outside the planet? And my friends, if you're looking to educate yourself on the matter of extraterrestrials, UAPs, UFOs, well, you've got to know by now Top 5 Scary is the place to be. I see the viewer stats in the videos. You goblins love when we talk about aliens. Well, if you want to keep loving them, click on through. We've got more unexplained sightings in the sky than the CIA. And if you want them delivered hot and fresh, you can subscribe and get them before anybody else. Number 4. Childs Whitted Case. The Childs Whitted encounter is one of the most recognized UFO encounters in American history for how surprisingly credible it seems. It happened shortly after the Roswell incident, when UFO fever was hot on everybody's minds in the States, and it was showing. The sighting occurred in the morning hours of one July 24th, 1948. The 2 pilots, one Clarence Childs and John Whitted, were flying approximately 5,000 feet above Montgomery, Alabama on a clear, normal night. Flight was going well, nothing too exciting, but at around 2:45 in the morning, Childs saw something peculiar. He noticed a dull red glowing light above and ahead of the aircraft, and it wasn't even remotely near Christmas, so it wasn't Rudolph leading the sleigh. He told Whitted that it must be a new type of army jet that was flying in front of them that neither of them had ever seen. They wanted to get a better look at it, and in a matter of seconds, well, they would, when the object flew past the right side of their plane and pulled up with a tremendous burst of flame protruding from its rear, and it zoomed upwards and onwards into the clouds. The 2 pilots described the object looking like a flying cigar with a cylindrical chassis and 2 decks and windows. Besides the 2 pilots, one passenger on the flight, one C.L. McKelvey, insisted that during his flight he saw a bright streak of red flashing lights by one of his windows. Now, Childs and Whitted were obviously pretty darn confused by whatever it was they'd saw. Didn't look like no plane they'd seen before, and the way it moved seemed technologically more advanced than anything the US Army was putting out in the late 40s. Now, the US Army proper would challenge this account, and their scientists insisted. They investigated the report and said that it was probably just a meteor the pilots and passengers had seen, which almost sounds like it might make sense until you stop and think about it for a second, because what meteor has windows and a glowing red light coming from it and propels itself forward and rapidly goes upward. Most meteors I've ever heard of go downwards. And Childs and Whitted both disagreed with this as well, saying they got a good long look at it and it wasn't a meteor. Whatever it truly was, though, might be lost to history, tragically. Number 3. The Gander, Newfoundland encounter. Our next story comes to us from Gander, Newfoundland, and it happened on February 10, 1951. A U.S. Naval Reserve lieutenant and pilot Graham Bethune was occupying the captain's seat of a plane flying near Newfoundland, Canada, when he spotted something unusual, massive, and rapidly approaching towards the plane. It resembled a disc. The co-pilot made a report of what he saw, and this is what he wrote. Take a listen. I observed a glow of light below the horizon about 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the water. The pilot and I observed its course and motion for about 4 or 5 minutes before calling it to the attention of the other crew members. Suddenly, the object changed direction at an incredible speed and began to pulsate, changing its colors as well. Then, it somehow reversed its course and tripled its speed until at last it disappeared over the horizon. The report would go on to say that whatever this object was, it came within 5 miles of the aircraft, which was proven later by radar evidence. Now, when the plane had landed, the entire crew was detained by intelligence officers and interrogated. At their destination, pilot and passengers were questioned again by naval intelligence and required to sign full disclosure documents. Now, take this next part with a grain of salt. Okay? Because I only found one source on this. But apparently a CIA scientist confidentially interviewed the pilot, and during their interrogation, he showed him a photo of a disc-like object that looked extremely similar to the one they had seen flying over the Atlantic. However, during the interviews, no Navy, Air Force, or CIA men would ever answer any questions related to extraterrestrials. No one would say the word alien, no one was saying UFO, nothing like that. They were trying very hard to downplay that. So what was it then? Because it sounds incredibly suspicious that the interviewers had a photo of something that looked similar to it and weren't saying the word alien at all. Number 2. November 1986 Japanese Airlines flight. Our next one comes to us from a pair of Japanese pilots. In November 1986, Japanese Airlines Flight 1628 was heading over Alaska. Captain Kenju Terauchi and a crew of 2 others were on a flight making routine cargo deliveries to France. Captain Terauchi saw something that caught his attention when he saw blinding lights flashing off at the left and the right of the plane. Now, initially he didn't think too much of it. He thought, hey, maybe these are just US fighter jets zipping around. As his plane furthered forward, he realized that the object was flying ahead of him was of the unidentified variety, a UFO, if you will. Terauchi said that it looked like 2 spaceships had stopped in front of their faces, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt warm in the face, he wrote. That almost sounds kind of pleasant, to be honest. Captain Terauchi described the objects as being cuboid-shaped spaceships with a jet propulsion system that had horizontal lines of circular exhausts clustered around a dark center. The captain had also reported that when the plane had flown by this object, ground communications were cut out and all radar was blocked. Well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Pretty interesting. Well, if you thought that was weird, the FAA would agree with it. That's the Federal Aviation Administration, who investigated the report very closely, interrogating Terauchi for everything they could out of the incident. Now, during this questioning, his co-pilot and his flight engineer, they said that they thought the object they saw was just strange lights, but they did agree that they really couldn't easily explain what it was they saw. In the end, the FAA ruled that what it was light refraction through ice crystals suspended in clouds. A bunch of science words. Sure. Number 1. Lieutenant Gorman. Our number 1 spot on this list is a humdinger of a tale. Now, most of us can only hope to maybe someday see a UFO in our lives, but I mean, maybe if you were like me and you watched Star Wars way too many times and you still ask the hairdressers to get your hair cut like Luke Skywalker, not like anybody I know. Maybe you dream of flying an X-Wing through the stars, dodging lasers, getting into a cool alien dogfight. It's a shame none of us can claim we've done that, except, you know, George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard. I don't think anyone would expect there to be anything exciting happening in North Dakota, but one of the best UFO encounters in American history did. Let's take a little listen and learn about it. It was 1948, a year after the New Mexico Roswell incident, while people were still hyper-focused on little gray men and flying saucers. Lieutenant Gorman was flying a fighter jet solo around the skies above Fargo when he saw what he thought was an aircraft around 500 feet below him. He radioed his tower, but the operator told him that there weren't any other planes to be around and that it was a suspicious vehicle. So Gorman told the tower back he was going to investigate the situation and flew in within 1,000 yards to try and positively ID the subject. Gorman said it looked to be about 6 to 8 inches, clear white and completely round without fuzz at the edges, and it was blinking on and off. As I approached, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. I thought it was making a pass at the tower. Gorman then said he thought the light charged at him. He didn't want to be the first pilot to crash into a UFO, so he readied himself to avoid it, but found the object suddenly shot straight upwards in the air, directly above him, and then disappearing into the clouds. Gorman tried his best to pull up to follow along, but his plane went into a stall while he was trailing it, and the entity had vanished. Back at the air tower, 2 traffic controllers reported they also saw a light flying above the airstrip they couldn't explain, and weren't present on any flight logs. Gorman was questioned about what he saw, and he said he was convinced that it wasn't just a light, that it moved too naturally, that it moved like it was reacting to his movements, as if it was playing a game with him. He said there was thought and precision behind all its maneuvers. We should ask it what it thought about all of that if Gorman was moving too naturally, reacting to all of that. Number 5. The Roswell autopsy. Perhaps one of the most famous pieces of lost alien footage is the infamous Roswell autopsy tape. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a UFO enthusiast like me, no doubt it's come up before at some point. Roswell was kind of the birthplace of UFO mania, where a lot of the first conspiracy theories and a lot of the public ideas we have about aliens really stem from. If you don't know somehow, the story goes that an alien craft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico, where it was swiftly apprehended by shadowy government agents looking to pull a curtain over the whole thing. Reverse engineered, studied, down to the pilot of the craft, recovered by FBI scientists. Almost immediately after, hushed whispers and rumors of a recorded alien autopsy set conspiracists and enthusiasts' mind ablaze in equal measures. Recorded footage of an alien body being dissected would be undeniable proof with world-shattering consequences, and would probably make for some pretty good ratings. Well, the Fox network would agree with you, because in 1995, the footage was broadcasted on Fox, presented by legendary thespian and #1 guy to trust in regards to human-alien relations, one Jonathan Frakes. The film broadcast was not the true footage of the autopsy, but rather a high-budget recreation to show for a wider public audience what had happened. The director claims he had seen the original footage from the 1947 autopsy, but couldn't release it. He claims that he spliced shots from the original footage into the faked footage to provide some clarity, but didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. And he insists that the video wasn't faked, but rather a reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, despite only being a reenactment, the special effects of the footage are remarkable. It does look pretty believable. It was helmed by industry legend Stan Winston, the special effects warlock responsible for bringing the Predator and the aliens alike. The alien body in the footage was filled with sheep guts, chicken entrails, pig knuckles, and raspberry jam to create the illusion of an alien filled to bursting with foreign organs, and probably tasted halfway decent with a little bit of soy sauce. So was the footage ever actually real, or was it all just cooked up to sweep up viewers on a dwindling TV season? The director maintains always that what he saw was real, he just wasn't allowed to show it, and did his best to show us what happened. There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think. Was he just showing how easy it is to fraud something, manipulate people into believing whatever they see? Who's to say if the true footage ever did come out, we would even believe it? We would probably just dismiss it the exact same way. But if you want to see way more scary footage, real or not, dismissible or provable, we have got loads and loads of that for you to enjoy. So click through, stay a while, and get scared all night long with top 5 scary. I'll be here the whole night and in this building. Number 4, Edgar Mitchell. The thing about most alien sightings is that they don't always come from the most reputable of sources. You know, it's usually a random internet post, maybe a blurry shot from an iPhone kind of thing, posted on Reddit with a caption like, "What is this?" Or, you know, it's somebody who was walking home late at night and saw some lights in the sky and didn't know it was a plane. And while I think we should respect the voice of the people and the common man, it'd be nice if we got someone with a little bit of clout to their name. Well, luckily we've got more than a few astronauts who've seen bizarre things up there and are willing to share their stories. Edgar Mitchell is one such man. He's stood on the face of the moon before, he helped save the Apollo 14 mission from becoming a disaster, he's the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a lifelong defender and believer in aliens and UFOs. Mitchell claims that he's seen things that prove existence of life outside the planet. First and foremost, he is a firm believer of the Roswell conspiracy, and he insists that all those stories are true and that the military has been hiding the truth behind what happened at Roswell for decades, adding on to say that it was buried, and the military propagated a covert movement to discredit everything that had happened at Roswell, to deter people from taking any news about UFOs and flying saucers seriously, dismissing it forever as tinfoil hat stuff. Mitchell claims that NASA believes the public wouldn't be able to handle the truth. Come on! We're ready. We're ready, we're all ready, we're big enough now to know the truth. It's like the tooth fairy, we're grown up, we know where the quarters are coming from, just tell us. And Edgar Mitchell's been trying to just tell us. In 2004, Edgar Mitchell told a Floridan newspaper that he knew there was a secret cabal inside the American government that took in and studied alien corpses, and that after JFK was removed from office, the group did not answer to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. He was quoted saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is where they are coming from. A shadowy organization existing outside the president's control with insider knowledge on aliens and trying to suppress the public." Did Mr. Mitchell just casually confirm the Men in Black are real? Now, NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, but obviously they would. What government is going to throw their hands up and admit that they have been slicing up alien bodies on the side? Number 3. The first flying saucer. Now, while the Roswell, New Mexico incident was the UFO sighting that really shot alien sightings into the mainstream public consciousness and kind of defined what alien sightings look like, you know, the idea of little gray or green men and flying saucers, it was obviously far from the first alien sighting ever recorded, just kind of the most popular. But not even a few weeks earlier, there was actually another famous sighting, and one that's thought to be the progenitor for sightings of UFOs being thought of as flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold was an American aviator. Unlike most UFO sightings, Kenneth never changed his story once, never made any kind of surrealist, outrageous claims, and stuck to the same story for the rest of his life. He saw weird saucers in the air he couldn't explain. Well, let's take a listen. It was 1947, June the 24th, weeks before Roswell, which occurred in July 1947. Mr. Arnold was flying his private plane over Washington by Mount Rainier. I've never been to Washington, so you guys gotta forgive me. He was looking for a recently downed transport plane that had a $5,000 bounty the US military was offering in exchange for its finding. As he was approaching the summit, Arnold noticed that he saw 9 blinding flashes of light hovering up above. When looking in closer, they resembled ships but looked like discs. Arnold said that he saw them flying in a bizarre pattern, with each position diagonally together, reporting that it reminded him of the tail of a kite. Arnold was an aviation expert and said that the craft seemed far more advanced than anything human beings were capable of at the time, moving at unbelievable speeds. He landed at a nearby airport and told crew that he saw something bizarre he couldn't rationalize, worried that perhaps it could have been missiles being fired at Washington. Reporters interviewed him and he was pressed for several questions, but no one could corroborate or figure out just exactly what it was he had seen. Arnold was questioned by the Army as well, who took his claims remarkably seriously, as he was a fairly respected and reputable man, and there wasn't really the same culture surrounding aliens and UFOs, and as such, his claim was met with genuine worry. No one ever figured it out, but the story of them being saucers, combined with the saucers seen in New Mexico, led to the public perception of UFOs picturing them as saucers for the better part of 60 years, pretty much to this day. Number 2. The Travis Walton abduction. Now, abduction stories can sometimes be a little much to believe, even for those with the most open minds who want to believe. You know, they all seem kind of the same. It's somebody you maybe can't trust driving home late at night, saw something strange, they woke up in a blinding light room and they got poked and prodded by little gray men. Well, Travis Walton's story is not dissimilar to that. It's pretty out there even by abduction standards, but it's too juicy to pass up, so pop open those ears. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger and was facing a fairly routine day, 6 other loggers and him driving around in the forest, when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed it looked like a flattened disc, a saucer of sorts even. Walton stepped out of the bed of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that knocked him backwards. The rest of the crew panicked and drove away. Huge faux pas, I'll say, leaving your coworker behind after being struck by an alien, but okay, you think you know somebody. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Walton awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because he'd found himself in a blindingly bright room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he knew something was amiss. 3 feet tall, with brown, quarter-sized pupils, with marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, obviously, as one would probably do, and was swiftly restrained by his captors. He tried to fight them off, but was greeted by a tall creature he said resembled a humanoid, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, a kind of Darth Vader looking thing. The masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room and put a translucent mask over his face. And Walton drifted out of consciousness again, unsure if anything was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually finds his way to a phone and called his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days, and he was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, scent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked out of existence and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was real, a real abduction, and he's maintained that story ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you think this story is fascinating and you're upset that nobody recorded any of it and there wasn't any footage of what Travis described, well, the tragic news is, yeah, it doesn't exist. You can, however, watch a 90s sci-fi movie that is directly based off Travis's case called Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime or something. It's got Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in it. He's a good actor. Yeah, check it out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The incident and conspiracy at Roswell, New Mexico is one of the most famous events in UFO culture. This incident is considered England's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Few other alien sightings can boast this many government witnesses, memos, and strange proof. Let's paint the scene. It was December 26, 1980. Oh, nice and festive and Christmas themed. Surrounding Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England was a series of Air Force bases and US Army personnel. Two of these stationed officers were John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. On this fateful night, the two of them were concerned by shining bright lights that were seen flying above the base, worrying that it could perhaps have been a threat or a spy plane scouting out their location. Burroughs said that he thought the lights looked like a beacon summoning people over, and over 40 people on the base all agreed, reporting seeing the lights and sharing their concerns. So the two men were sent over to Rendlesham Forest to investigate. In their official document, the two men claimed that they had seen a strange, shining, triangular object that was pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men recognized it as an aircraft from any military across the globe. The craft had seemed far too advanced for anything of this world. Black and made out of a smooth, opaque glass. It didn't appear to have any wings or landing gear or even really any methods of propulsion or exhaust. The men describe it as covered in hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the hull of the vessel all over. Neither of the men could identify the glyphs as anything they'd seen before. Duh, it's alien stuff. As the craft touched down, nearby animals were being driven into a frenzy, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning, communications equipment cutting out. The two personnel could no longer call back to the base. Now, not even 2 days later, the Rendlesham UFO was spotted again. 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen hovering above the bases surrounding Rendlesham. This time, the crews came significantly more prepared, waiting and ready for the UFO to make contact. The patrol group had found depressions in the ground, and their Geiger counters started blowing up with noise. And the group had known that they'd come across where the UFO had been. And then, right on time, the patrol saw the same craft flying above overhead, disappearing into the night. Years passed, and we're still no closer to understanding just what occurred with those faithful sightings. And we may never know. Number 5. Well, first and foremost, if you were looking for any proof that the government definitely knows more about aliens than they let on, how about from the mouth of the 3-letter organizations themselves? The CIA released a tweet in 2014, wow, obviously was meant to be taken in a joking manner, but still pretty illuminating, saying that throughout the 50s and 60s, they estimate that 50% of all sightings of unexplained aerial phenomena and UFOs were simply the CIA testing new aircraft. Out of context, the CIA admits they were behind 50% of all UFO sightings is an extremely attention-grabbing headline, and probably what I should have named this video. Would have got you to click better. And it is an attention-grabbing headline. At the time they were testing the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, codenamed Dragon Lady, which was able to fly at altitudes thought unreachable by a one-manned aircraft at the time. We know the CIA will always be a little bit more technologically advanced than they're willing to let on. That's just the nature of shadowy governments. But the conspiracy theorist in me has to wonder, is it even just the littlest bit possible that them releasing this could be a misinformation campaign? I mean, this is just what they're willing to admit, right? Who's to say what they won't admit? What if they put stuff like this out there so the next time you see something odd in the sky, you just dismiss it thinking, oh, that's just the CIA testing airplanes, instead of the more logical, reasonable answer that it's an alien spacecraft observing you from up above? And what if all I'm saying is just wild speculating and tinfoil hat level conspiracies because I'm trying to get views on video? It's more likely than you think. But them admitting they're responsible for most UFO sightings intones to me that they're aware of a lot more UFO sightings that are reported. Makes you wonder how much they research them all. Do you think they look at every blurry cell phone camera video posted to Reddit, or just the really serious ones that make the news? I'm hoping to get some answers someday, and I have a feeling that some of those answers are in this video. It won't all be wild speculation, I promise. And hey, if you want to see more alien stuff, click through. we've got boxes full of declassified documents, NASA stories, and videos that are just out of this world. Get it? So stay subscribed and stay scared, and I'll see you there. Number 4, the Guy Hoddle memo. So it's a pretty much an open book secret that the 3-letter agencies have known about aliens in some way or another since they started writing things down. They don't hide it or pretend to hide it anymore, which is nice. They finally admitted that Area 51 even exists for the first time a couple years ago, so we could all use a little openness in our day-to-day. Let's take a look at one of the FBI's most talked about and most viewed documents, the Guy Hoddle memo. And despite being one of the most seen FBI memos, it's but a single-page document that was never followed up on. Well, it sounds like we should follow up on it. Guy Hoddle was the head of the FBI field office in Washington, and his report was addressed to the head of the FBI, one J. Edgar Hoover. The contents of the report were simple, but shocking. It detailed the descriptive encounter of an agent making a physical sighting of what they believed to be a UFO. It's dated 3 years after the Roswell incident, but it was reported in New Mexico for what it's worth. Here's a quote from the memo. The saucers were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. Now if you ask me, that is almost too perfect, isn't it? I mean, the memo lines up nearly perfectly with the stereotypical, like, cartoon description of aliens being little gray or green men flying around in flying saucers around New Mexico. The memo goes on to read that the agent claims they had found the saucers because an FBI high-powered radar in the area had detected it, and this radar detecting it had interfered with the controlling mechanism of the crafts. But despite all of this, which really seems like it's the paper trail screaming, proving, hey, aliens are out there, you should go check them out, the memo ends by saying no further evaluation was attempted, and the Hoddle memo was never followed up on, presumably crumpled up and thrown away. Director Hoover, I guess, thought it wasn't worth his time and disregarded it, leaving it now as nothing more than an incredibly odd piece of history. Number 3, Project Blue Book. Well, here's the thing. Even if Director Hoover at the FBI didn't see fit to look into the Hoddle memo, there were definitely other organizations that were looking into UFOs. Maybe it's not just the FBI, but I can tell you that the Air Force sure was. If you're an experienced UFO enthusiast, perhaps you're already very familiar with Project Blue Book, but if you're not, hey, let's talk about it. The project was officially started in 1952 and terminated in 1969. And the project had 2 main goals. 1. Confirm if UFOs were a threat to national security. And 2. Scientifically analyze any UFO-related data. Well, that seems like pretty strong evidence to me. Not that the project existed to see if UFOs are real, but rather to determine if they were a threat. That seems like they're writing and admitting like, no, we know, we just want to know if they're scary. And is that not the most human sentiment you've ever heard? If you guys learned nothing from Avatar, we gotta be making friends with aliens, not being afraid of them. In the years of Project Blue Book's operations, a stunning 12,618 reports were filed and collected. And those are just the ones that are officially recorded. Of those, interestingly, there were an individual 700 reports that were found to be unexplainable after research and intense analysis. Isn't that interesting? Now, a great number of these reports turned out to be the U-2 spy plane that we mentioned all the way back in point number 5, if you remember that far away. But that still leaves 700 completely unexplained sightings of aircraft that the USAF looked into and could not find answers for. The project was ultimately shut down in 1969, with the official explanation being given that, number 1, no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force has ever given any indication of threat to our national security. And number 2, there has been no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of present-day scientific knowledge. And number 3, there has been no evidence indicating the sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles. Oh, well that sounds like kind of a bit of a bummer, doesn't it? They went through thousands of documents and declared that none of it was worthwhile evidence to suggest that aliens exist. Well, it's a shame that we're never going to mention any more things of the Air Force on this video, or any more things about pilots encountering aliens. I mean, that really blows. I mean, except for our next point. Take a listen. Number 2, the UAP Report. Very recently, the Pentagon declassified a series of documents known internally as the UAP Report, and it was basically the sequel to Project Blue Book, the streaming follow-up. And yeah, Every single time we have an alien video, I'm probably gonna have a little meltdown where I talk about how last year the government confirmed that they researched UFOs and that's what they spend your money on, and no one seemed to care about this, they just slipped it under the rug. I guess we were kind of busy with other stuff, but still. What happened to our curious minds, people? We learned that the various three-letter agencies in the States had been researching, analyzing, and scouting out sightings of UFOs, mostly because pilots just could not stop reporting them during training ops. One pilot, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that he saw hundreds, maybe thousands in his career as a Navy pilot. One of the more famous ones is the Tic Tac sighting, referring to a massive oval-shaped aircraft that was spotted by two pilots. This one comes from 2004, and the two veteran pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, were the ones who called it in. Two respected, trustworthy Navy veterans. Their report reads that the objects were spotted almost out of nowhere, some 80,000 feet in the air, which would then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, then stop at around 2,000 feet and hover in place. Very normal airplane behavior. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up into the sky on a 90-degree angle. For weeks, Navy crew was watching these objects trying to determine just what they were. They certainly weren't American in origin, and they weren't recognized by any other organizations. To confirm what they'd seen, Slate and Fravor were sent off on a reconnaissance mission to get eyes on it. What they found was more confusing than either of the two men could ever have imagined. They reported back that the object they were seeing was like a giant Tic Tac, white-colored, oval-shaped, and 40 feet long. Far too big to be a drone, and it didn't maneuver in a way like an aircraft would, making erratic movements, staying out of reach of radars, as if it knew it was trying to stay undetected. The pilots flew towards a rendezvous point to touch down, and presumably cracked their windows open and asked each other, hey, what the hell was that? But as they flew towards the LZ, the UAP flew past them at a breakneck speed and then disappeared entirely. When questioned about it, Fravor said that it was unlike any aircraft he had ever seen in his life. I mean, that guy flew planes like every day for years, so he probably knows a thing or two. Number 1. Non-terrestrial officers. Now, if you're like me, you're probably frustrated that you know the truth is so close within grasp behind closed doors. To know in your heart of hearts that there are answers to the unexplained just out of sight would drive you to do something crazy. Now, for most of us, all we can do is sit and speculate and maybe watch some lovely top 5 videos of a very handsome host talking about aliens. But for one Gary McKinnon, a Scottish computer programmer, he decided that wasn't enough and decided to take matters into his own hands. McKinnon was a genius computer hacker and had his sights set on the biggest prize he could imagine, going after NASA's servers to see if they had any hidden alien data just waiting to be found, in what was described as the biggest military hack of all time. Quite the conversation starter. Why would anyone risk their career, freedom, and livelihood on this? Well, Gary wanted the truth and he would do anything to get it. McKinnon claims he had insider knowledge that confirmed the US had suppressed anti-gravity technology reverse engineered from UFOs and free energy. In his own statement, McKinnon said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills." Yeah. Well, so what did McKinnon find? Well, he didn't find proof of the reverse-engineered UFOs that he'd been hoping for, but he found quite a lot that was remarkably illuminating. First up, a 400-page document called the Disclosure Project, outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service, reporting all their sightings and scientific analysis on unexplained flying objects. That would already be pretty impressive, but on top of that, McKinnon also managed to find a document entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers. Non-terrestrial officers? What? What? Is that just fancy talk for astronaut? Well, the document was a spreadsheet listing the names of NASA officers and employees who were to be transferred to new ships or to serve on board space stations. But here's where it gets weird. McKinnon noted that the names of these vessels listed did not appear to exist in any other database. And if that wasn't enough, McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble anything he had ever seen. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. One wonders if that's the same as the Tic Tac ship. He said he was in a shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Now, after pulling off an unbelievable fast one on NASA, McKinnon couldn't resist a bit of cheeky cyber vandalism and edited NASA's website homepage with a bit of text that read, "Your security is crap, by the way." Now, I'm not endorsing hacking a government website, but that's one of the coolest things I've ever read. Now, I don't know how much you know about the United States government. Boy, do they just love it when you prove to them that they have a massive security breach in their most classified data. Presumably the only thing that that kept McKinnon from being strapped to a car battery and thrown into a black van by the men in black was the fact that he lived in Scotland and was kind of hard to get a hold of. He was arrested by UK police, and the United States government tried their absolute hardest to have him extradited to the States to be tried for the fullest extent of his crimes. Honestly, I bet it was the note. I bet that's what really pushed them over the edge. McKinnon managed to avoid extradition and was protected by the Crown for serving out what would have been a 70-year sentence. But presumably he's not planning any road trips to the States anytime soon, and I'm sure NASA has improved their security just a little bit.
Number 5. Mars. The goal of the Mars exploration program is, quote, to explore Mars and to provide a continuous flow of scientific information and discovery through a carefully selected series of robot orbiters, landers, and mobile laboratories interconnected by a high bandwidth Mars-Earth communications network. Okay, yeah, that's great and all, but like, are you selecting which pictures you share with us? Cause we'd love to see what the planet looks like. In 4K, please. I know I would. I think it's funny that we can see an infrared cloud into the vast distances of space with the new Webb telescope, yet 4K pictures, still none of the other side of the moon. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it's a lot closer if we wanted to start there, you know? But Mars is great too. We've all seen the pictures of right angles and impossibly formed canyons and craters from Perseverance to get an idea of what exactly the red planet looks like. Yeah, it's red. And sandy, like PEI sand. But we're starting to see some weirder and weirder stuff from NASA as it collects scientific information up there. Like, say, this potential crash landing site. I mean, if it was a crater, bigger hole. If it was an asteroid, bigger hole. Nope, just this thing that looks exactly like what it'd look like if you whipped a rock into sand. Just kind of skips and, you know? This would happen. Buzz Lightyear to Star Command, we've crash landed on a strange planet. I don't know, I'm not saying this stuff's covered up or anything, but like, I feel like if we have the equivalent of a bad garage door security camera, you know? Doing like a long 345-degree shots and only showing us more sand. This thing could be in the Gobi Desert for all we know, we'd never know the difference. Show us the bases, where's the monoliths? Also, one lens? One lens? Like, where's the X-ray, the infrared, radio waves? Let's go, people. We've all played No Man's Sky. Where's the 4K and the jetpacks, dude? Number 4, Paul Hellyer. Okay, now on to some more scary stuff. Hey, also if you dig the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, or comment down below. Do you think they're releasing this late report to Congress or what? Just kinda hoping everyone forgets it's due and just moves on? Anyway. Flying on up to Canada, who's been involved in UFOs for a very, very long time. The RAF and RCMP have been on top of this stuff, I'd say even before the Americans. Paul Theodore Hellyer, August 1923 to August 2021. First off, rest in paradise, sir. This man has done more for us up north than we'll ever know. This man has and will play a huge role in the UAP phenomenon as a whole. I encourage you all to look into Paul here a little bit deeper. An engineer, a politician, writer, commentator. He was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. In 1967, Hellyer inaugurated a UAP landing site in St. Paul, Alberta. The town built it as a Canadian Centennial Celebration project, as a symbol of keeping space free from human warfare. In 2005, Hellyer made headlines by publicly announcing that he was a true believer in the existence and was an invited speaker at the conference in Toronto where he shared that he had seen a UFO during his career. In 2007, Paul was demanding world governments to disclose alien tech that could be used to solve problems of climate change. Hey, that's pretty cool. In an interview in 2014, Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for the last 1,000 years, with most of them passing by from another star system, and of course, those living with us on Earth from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moons. Awesome. Just for some credentials here, Paul ran for the federal election like 12 times. Yeah, Air Force, Navy, former Minister of National Defense. Guy was 98, people. Do some homework. He's easily the highest ranked true tinfoil hatter we know of. 98 years that man graced our planet. I wonder what he knew. Number 3, government. Speaking of disclosure and how we're all kind of right in the middle of it, right now, we go to Congress. It's odd because we obviously joke and have a good time and make light of the whole situation, but like, whether you like it or not, it's happening. First off, I'm scared. I'll admit it, I'm scared. I scared my stuff into this stuff. I discovered John Greenwald in like the 9th grade and it's been rabbit holes ever since, let me tell you. When Congress starts talking about other planets and aliens, it starts mocking up some public citizen hearings with ex-Congress members. It's starting to get a little scary, but these public hearings, they whip this bad boy out. The cream of the crop UFO video that they say they have. The portrait mode, the 4 seconds of a circular something. Like, that's it? Apparently it's taken from the cockpit of a US fighter jet. May 17th, 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counter-Proliferation held Congress hearings with top military officials to discuss the reports of UAPs. Did you miss it? Yeah, it was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yeah, really important stuff. Also, how come they put like the grainy 90s filter on the video? Dude, like we make videos here, we're not gonna notice that? This thing's grainier than the first episode of The Golden Girls. The first public Congress hearing in over 50 years, and this is it. Again, there's some mock citizen hearings that were way more convincing and way more informative from way more reliable personnel. Also, better quality. Interesting, huh? But again, why wasn't all this shared when it originally happened? The government says, yeah, there's like 14 things we can't explain, yet try and solve the easy ones. Apparently there's like 144 more classified videos to just rummage through. It's been a big month, I will say that. 16 candidates for the new UAP NASA program, report late from Halloween, weather balloons, airborne clutter, foreign surveillance. What are they going to tell us this week? Number 2, Dave Foley. And we come to yet another great Canadian, Mr. Dave Foley. Those of you who aren't familiar with the North and what we produce up here, Dave is a Canadian actor, comedian, director, producer, and writer. He created Kids in the Hall, a Canadian gem, and also an avid believer in the phenomenon. He took to Twitter a couple months ago and caught the attention of many. Foley tweeted, quote, "After years of interest in the UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently, at great speed, hovered and pulsated with light." End quote. Now this ship does look a lot like what we've seen in the past reports, so who knows, Dave may actually have seen a UFO. Maybe these aliens are just fans of A Bug's Life. Guys flick, man. Maybe they just want an autograph, I know I would. He continues online, quote, "Many people who have encountered the phenomenon are afraid to discuss it because of the thoughtless and uninformed derision it inspires. Many who discuss it have had their lives ruined by that derision." I should point out, the white lights were on the front of the craft, assuming it was moving forward, and those lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. We felt like our emotions were being tamped down. We were unnaturally unresponsive to what we were seeing. In a way, I'm still experiencing that. End quote. Hey, it's all fun and games when the celebs get involved, isn't it? But up here, Canada's been involved for a long time. More publicly too. Just last week a report said that Canadians were briefed last year on what's what with the phenomenon. A document released a couple days ago say the February briefings were delivered by multiple members of the Pentagon UAP task force, and attending was 10 Canadian defense officials, including the Royal Canadian Air Force and military intelligence. Right? Like, not just comedians and sketches, you know? These people have been around a while and read some stuff. Paul Hellyer type stuff. And number 1, Tom DeLonge. Come on, this is an easy one. And probably the most confusing yet reliable source of them all? I know, trust me. Blink-182. "Hey mom, there's something in the back room." Well, there actually could be. Remember enjoying their song Aliens Exist before believing that aliens actually exist? Yeah, the lyrics hit a bit different now, don't they? Cut to 2017, former Blink member Tom DeLonge, now the co-founder of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Sounds fun, right? Until you see the panel. Military generals, astrophysicists, psychologists that have been studying this stuff since the 50s. It's the real deal. But how can a rock star be the head of this phenomenon? Well, he's into aliens, and that's an understatement. Susan Gao, the Pentagon spokesperson who made the public statements on disclosure, said that the Navy had confirmed that those 3 videos that are so wide in circulation are authentic recordings made by naval aviators. And guess who got all those out to us? Quote, "Everyone still looks to the United States government as having all the resources. We've been waiting around as scholars and researchers for many decades, hoping God that one day the government would come to us on what this is. This whole thing could be answered by the government. We're just waiting for them to come help us out with some of the research. This situation that happened is what we've been hoping it would do, so it can ignite more intellectuals to get into this race and help us figure out more about it." End quote. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Physicists, astronauts, that's who we want to hear from, you know? And just for dessert, here's what Tom posted on his Instagram. You tell me what's up.